a debilitating sickness took over my body. I'm not even sure what age it was, but it was gradual. I became very sick in my body. I graduated college and I started to work, but this sickness was so bad that I would just collapse for no reason. You see, since I was a baby, my parents, good people, they gave me everything I needed, but they were religious. And they dedicated me to these gods of Hinduism. So as a young child, I was controlled by forces that I had no control over. And so all I could think of is I needed to be healed, but I didn't know how. So I went to temples. There was a time, I think I was 18 and my father, no, maybe 17. My father took me to India to a temple. And it was a tall temple, Bishop, and it had a spiral staircase, and it seemed to go on forever. And I thought if I climbed that staircase, maybe I'd meet God on top. So my parents were in the foyer of this beautiful, ornate, traditional looking temple with carvings all over. And I took off running. I could then. And I took off running on these steps to arrive at the top. And I just saw this huge area. It had an outer court, and then it had an inner place with a water and a candlestick. Yes. Outer court, inner court, and then there was a big heavy veil. See, the enemy knows a good thing, he'd counterfeit it. He copies anything. So I look at the veil and I thought, that's where God must be. He's hiding from me. Well, the priest wasn't around. See, I knew the rules. When the priest was not around, you can possibly do some things, sort of get away with it. The priest was around, I just didn't see him. He probably was inside somewhere. So I opened this heavy veil aside. It was heavy. I had to push with it. And then I went in, and there was this I don't know how many feet, this huge idol, many eyes, 4 or 5 heads, many arms. And it looked imposing and intimidating. And I thought, that's it. Surely God can heal me. Surely this thing here would heal me. I grabbed a hold of it and started begging this God to heal my body. And I don't know where the priest came from. I knew he was around, probably hiding or whatever. And he suddenly came at me with his hands and his fist raised. And he said, how dare you defile this sacred place? Now you've touched this idol. How dare you defile it? Of course I defiled it. I couldn't even read the books, much less touch this God. Yes, I defiled it. To him, I took off running downstairs like the demons were after me, because I thought he was going to beat me or hit me, do something. I was like, I'm sorry. And he shouted after me and said, you are a sinner. You will never be able to touch God. There will always be a wall between you and God. Those words never left me. I said, well, I'm sunk for now. That's it. Do you know who you worship, CCC? Do you know this morning that no matter who you are, where you've come from, what you've done yesterday, last night, or last year, you have access. You have access. It doesn't matter. Yes, we sinners have an access. That veil was torn into 2, and we are worshiping a touchable God. We can touch him. He can touch us. We can enter the throne of grace boldly, he said, in the time of need through the blood. But I didn't know that then. See, I could only hear the voice of this Hindu priest telling me, you're a sinner. You cannot touch God. You defile this place. So I ran all the way down those spiral steps, met my parents in the foyer, and they said, what happened to you? I said, nothing. Let's just go back to the hotel. Went back to the hotel and then flew back home the next day. My pilgrimage to search for God was over for now. My sickness was still in my body. And then I remembered that many years ago, people would come to my door and give me a tract. Jesus saves. Well, who's that? I didn't know who Jesus was. And I certainly wasn't interested in another God. I had many already. Thank you. 3.3 million plus Jesus? No thanks. And they're like, Jesus saves. And I'm like, well, thank you very much, but I've got my own religion. You know what I'm talking about. Yes, you do. And so when the pain ravaged and it became so bad that me passing out and collapsing, and the doctors thought they had a tumor in my brain. Some of them, and then they did CAT scan. They did all kinds of scans and testing. They couldn't find out why that this pain was just growing and debilitating, and there was no cure. That all they did was they gave me a bottle of painkillers. You know, if you take 4 a day, you might be able to manage it. I didn't want to manage it. I wanted to cure it. And so I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe if I took the whole bottle, I'll manage it real good. I'd die, and then, no life, no pain. When you're desperate, you think thoughts like that. When you're desperate and there's no answer and hope is just a dream or talk, you think things like that. So I was desperate. So probably on the last day of my life on this planet, or at least according to my plans, I was sitting in my room. It was late, probably 10:30, 11 o'clock. I had not taken any medication. I was just in so much pain. And then I remembered a tract, Jesus Saves. I also remembered a Christmas card that I once received. I don't know who would even send me a Christmas card. We didn't celebrate Christmas. But in that, again, it says Jesus, Savior. I'm like, you know what? What have I got to lose? What have I got to lose? Nobody would know. They're not going to find out. I'll call him. See if he hears me. See if he even knows me. After all, the priest said that I could never go through the veil. That I didn't have access. So nothing is going to happen in this empty room. The lights were switched off. It was time to go to bed. But I sat up, shaking in pain. And I cried out, Jesus! Nothing happened at first. I said, I'm Hindu. I worship many gods. Just in case you didn't know. I was introducing myself to him. Now it is. I didn't know he knew all things. I didn't know he enabled me to be conceived. That he knew me. Even when I was in my mother's womb, I didn't know any of it. I didn't know him. You do. You don't have an excuse. Don't even try to look for one anymore. You do. And so I tried again. Jesus! And in that darkened room, see that room, there wasn't street lights outside. It was built in such a way that there was a street out there, but no street lights. And so there was this light. It could not have come from a street light because there were no street lights outside that house that we lived in Malaysia. And a light just penetrated the room. I never saw a face, but there was a form that filled the entire room. A light and a voice. The first and only time that I've ever heard him audibly. Nowadays, it's in my spirit, and I thank God for that voice. But that day, when I cried out to him and told him I need healing in my body, that voice rang out in my room. I am Jesus. I am God. And the pain in my body that I had for many years, that I'd become accustomed to, was healed. In an instant, the pain was gone. Oh, come on, CCC, get excited. Get excited with me. For yourselves, for me, for those that need him, for those that need the Messiah. Can we shout to God? Shout to God. Oh, the pain left. The pain disappeared. The problems just started. My parents were still upstairs in the room. The next day was a Friday. Just any old day for you and I these days, but Friday for the Hindu is prayer day. So early the next morning, my mother knocks on my door. I'm still basking in this Jesus deal that I have no clue what just happened the night before. All I know is that I couldn't go back. He'd come to my life now. My pain was gone. I was a testimony. He had healed my pain. So what do I do? What do you do when you're faced with truth and then the other side of your life? What do you do? My mother knocked on the door, and I was still just so excited that Jesus had healed me. I opened the door. I'd forgotten it was Friday and a Hindu. I don't think I was Hindu after that. I knocked on the door. She knocked on the door, opened it. I said, "Yes, Mom." She said, "What do you mean, yes, Mom? Why aren't you dressed?" I'm like, "For what?" She looked at me like I lost my mind. And she said, "We're going to the temple. We're going to the temple. We're going to the temple to do prayers. You know, get dressed." And I grabbed her hand. I said, "Mom, I can't go." She said, "Why not? You sick?" Boy, that day I wish I had the flu or something. Something to blame on. Yes, I'm sick. Leave me alone. I couldn't lie. Don't know why. I looked at her and I said, "I can't go to the temple, Mom, because Mom, I saw Jesus." And my mom really then looked at me like I lost my mind. She looked at me and she said, "I don't know what you're talking about. Get dressed, get in the car." My mother was the granddaughter and great-granddaughter of chief priests. My dad came down and said, "Why aren't you ready?" I said, "I'm not going to the temple. I'm sorry. Forgive me, but I cannot go to the temple." So they left me alone. They just thought probably I was having one of those spells. I don't know what they thought, but they just thought that, because I was sick for a long, long time. They knew about my physical pain and physical sickness. And so they let it be and they went. My mother said, "When I come back, we will talk." All I knew was to get a hold of that name that you know, that no matter how hard it gets, you can get a hold of that name. And I got a hold of that name and I said, "Jesus, help me. I don't know what to say or what to do when they